Have you ever heard a voice that didn't just sing, but healed? A voice so fragile yet so powerful, it seemed to carry both pain and prayer within every note. In the crowded heart of Manila, where the streets never sleep and dreams often fade beneath the city noise, a little boy named Elian Cruz stood barefoot on a cracked pavement, clutching a broken microphone connected to an old speaker. His clothes
Please
were
subscribe
worn,
to our
his hair
channel.
tangled, but when he sang, the world seemed to pause. Around him, jeepneys roared, vendors shouted, and people rushed past without a glance. Yet a few would stop, even if just for a moment, drawn to that angelic sound echoing through the chaos. Some dropped coins into a small metal can beside him. Most didn't. Still, Elian sang, not for money, but for something deeper. Every word he sang was a silent cry for a life beyond hunger, beyond the narrow alley he called home. Beside him sat Rosa, his mother, her weary eyes following his every movement. She had worked all day washing strangers' clothes by the river, her hands red and raw, but her smile never faded when Elian sang. To her, his voice wasn't just talent, it was a miracle she had prayed for since his father's accident years ago. Rosa believed that God had given her son a gift, not to make them rich, but to remind them that beauty could still be born in poverty.
Please subscribe to our channel.
And somewhere in the corner of that busy street was Tito Ben, an old man with a guitar that had more cracks than strings. He had once played in smoky bars, chasing fame that never came. But when he heard Elian sing for the first time, something inside him stirred again. Every evening after that, he joined the boy, strumming softly, letting the child's voice rise above his chords like dawn over the city skyline. The city might have ignored them, but destiny had not. Somewhere across the ocean, a stage waited, a place where stories like Elian's were rarely told, but never forgotten once heard. Could a barefoot boy from the slums of Manila truly stand on that world stage one day? Could his song reach hearts he had never seen, faces he had never known? The answer was waiting, hidden within the melody of his dreams. Long before anyone noticed his voice, Elian Cruz was just another child lost in the blur of Manila's forgotten corners. His home was a shanty made of rusted iron sheets, perched beside a drainage canal that overflowed every time the rains came. Inside, a single bulb flickered weakly, casting shadows that told stories of survival more than comfort. Elian had learned early what it meant to go to bed hungry. There were nights when Rosa quietly pretended she wasn't hungry so her son could eat the last handful of rice. She would hum old lullabies, her voice trembling but gentle, as if the melody itself could fill their empty stomachs. Elian listened, memorizing every note, every rise and fall. It was from her that he learned how music could hold pain and still sound beautiful. When Rosa left for work before sunrise, Elian would wander through the narrow alleys, carrying a plastic bag of old batteries, his small speaker, and the microphone that Tito Ben had repaired with tape. Singing was his only way to earn a few coins. The city had become his stage, the streetlights his spotlight. Children his age ran barefoot playing tag, their laughter echoing through the broken walls. Elian wanted to join them, but life had made him older than his years. He had no time for games, every peso mattered. Some days he'd earn enough for food, other days, nothing but dust and exhaustion. Still, he never stopped singing. Sometimes, the sound of his voice drifted through open windows of cafes or jeepneys waiting in traffic. A few people paused, startled by the purity of that tone coming from such a small boy. But moments passed, and life resumed its usual rhythm. Manila was a city that saw too much to stop for one dreamer. And yet, even in the darkest corners, light finds its way. One evening, as golden light spilled across the skyline, Elian stood by the footbridge near the market. The wind carried his song further than before, past the crowd, past the traffic, into the phone of a stranger who decided to record it. That one recording would soon travel farther than any of them could imagine. A spark had been lit, quiet, unseen, but it would change everything. There was a time when Marco believed that hard work alone could change his destiny. But dreams are fragile things, they can fade beneath the weight of responsibility and time. The turning point came 2 years ago, on the day he lost his mother. She had been his quiet supporter, the one who told him that his voice carried warmth like sunlight through rain. Her death left a silence that no song could fill. Since that day, Marco's music felt heavier, sadder. He tried to sing, but the words caught in his throat. Every note reminded him of the promise he couldn't keep, to make his mother proud before she closed her eyes for the last time. Nights became longer, and the world seemed smaller. He buried himself in factory shifts, hiding from the echo of his own unfulfilled dream. Luz often tried to cheer him up, but she could see how distant he had become. The man who once filled their small home with laughter now stared blankly at the flickering light bulb above their dinner table. The radio played softly, yet Marco rarely listened anymore. Even his guitar, his oldest companion, lay untouched, gathering dust in the corner. One evening, as rain poured over the tin roof, Marco came across a flyer online, America's Got Talent auditions, open for all. For a moment, something stirred inside him. It wasn't confidence, but a quiet voice whispering what if. Yet, fear answered back louder. What if he failed? What if the world laughed again? The real struggle wasn't on the stage, it was inside him. Marco wasn't just fighting for a dream, he was fighting against the voice of doubt that had grown louder with every disappointment. The fear of being seen as a joke haunted him. But deep down, there was also guilt, the guilt of giving up too soon, of not believing in himself the way his mother once did. That night, with trembling hands, he picked up his guitar again. His voice cracked, his eyes watered, but something inside him awakened. And that was the night Marco decided, if he was going to fail, he would fail trying. The morning sun spilled through the thin curtains of Marco's small apartment, painting soft golden streaks on the cracked floor. It was the day after his 34th birthday, a day that felt like any other. The alarm buzzed, the kettle whistled, and the familiar exhaustion weighed on his shoulders. But something was different in the air that morning. A message blinked on his old phone screen, "Congratulations. You've been shortlisted for the AGT Manila pre-auditions." For a long moment, Marco just stared at the words, unable to breathe. He hadn't even realized Luz had sent in his video, secretly recording one of his late-night songs and submitting it online. She stood behind him now, smiling nervously. "You deserve this," she whispered softly, her voice trembling with hope. At first, Marco wanted to refuse. He wasn't ready, he told himself. He wasn't young, stylish, or confident like the others. But then, as he sat on the edge of his bed, he looked at the worn-out photo of his mother taped to the wall, her smile still calm and reassuring. It felt as though her eyes were telling him to go, to live once more through the music he had buried in fear. That small moment, just a message on a screen, became the spark that reignited everything inside him. He took a long breath and picked up his guitar, its strings slightly rusted from neglect. The first chord he strummed felt like coming home. His heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from the raw energy of possibility. From that day on, his world changed quietly. After work, he stayed up late practicing. His hands blistered, his voice cracked, but his spirit grew stronger. Rico joined him, bringing his old guitar and laughter back into Marco's nights. Luz recorded every rehearsal, cheering him through every mistake. It wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a promise. A promise to his mother, to Luz, and to himself. The moment Marco stepped onto that airport floor weeks later, ticket in hand, he realized something powerful: the world hadn't changed, but he had. For the first time, he was no longer afraid to be seen. The golden confetti fluttered like dreams finally taking shape. Elian stood motionless, his mouth slightly open, eyes glistening as if he couldn't trust what he was seeing. The music swelled through the auditorium while the audience roared in unison, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears. In that vast sea of faces, not one person saw a street boy, they saw a miracle. Backstage, members of the production crew were crying too. The cameramen lowered their lenses for a moment, overwhelmed by the purity of what they had just witnessed. Even Simon Cowell, known for his sharp critiques, had stood up, clapping slowly, his expression soft with awe. He didn't need to say a word, his eyes said enough. Elian's small figure was barely visible under the falling gold. When the stage lights dimmed and he was escorted backstage, the confetti still clung to his hair and shirt. He clutched a handful of it in his palm, as if trying to hold on to the moment before it disappeared. In a quiet corner, a producer knelt beside him, telling him he had just made history. But Elian didn't understand words like viral, views, or millions. All he knew was that people had listened, truly listened, for the first time. Far away in Manila, Rosa watched the performance on a small borrowed phone. The video had reached her before anyone could call. As the golden buzzer was pressed, she fell to her knees on the cement floor, her hands covering her face. The neighbors gathered outside, drawn by her sobs of joy. The boy who once sang on the streets for coins was now shining on the world's biggest stage. Tito Ben, sitting by his usual spot near the footbridge, saw the same clip later that night. The glow from the screen lit his wrinkled face as tears rolled down his cheeks. He whispered a prayer of gratitude, his trembling fingers brushing the strings of his old guitar. For Elian, everything changed in that single moment. The streets that once ignored him now cheered his name. The world that once seemed too far away had suddenly opened its arms. But fame comes with both light and shadow, and soon, Elian would learn that every dream carries its own test.